Welcome everyone, welcome to LGP's First Nations Procurement Scheme. This is our launch webinar where we're blessed to have you all here with us to listen to a little bit about what we've created and what we want to share today. For those who I haven't met, my name is Luke Kenny. I'm the CEO here at LGP and I'm really pleased to be able to bring this new initiative from LGP to all of you this morning. A little bit about how we'll use our time. I'll go through a little bit about the vision in terms of where we've come from, why have we created this First Nations scheme. Then I'll hand over to Maria to share a little bit about how it works. And then we're really blessed to have Debbie Morgan-Farrar with us, a lady who's been working in our Reconciliation Action Plan program as our First Nations consultant. And we welcome her to this particular exercise as well. And she's going to share some detail for everyone around impact. And as this initiative gets off the ground over the next few weeks and months, we will be able to hear from Debbie in terms of what that's going to mean. And we'll make sure we wrap up right on 11:30 for everybody so you can get on to the rest of your day. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that Maria and I and the team are joining us here from the Sydney CBD. We're on Gadigal land, but I would like to acknowledge the First Nations people on whose land we meet from here today, as well as where you're joining from. I pay my respects to elders past and present. I celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. Again, welcome everyone. A little bit about our vision. You can see on the slide the words that we've captured to share with you what we're doing and why we're doing it. Some of the things I would say that are most meaningful from that vision for your reference is to start to think about how does local government procurement in the work that we do, and for those that are familiar with what we do, our job and our role is to connect New South Wales councils with suppliers in the private sector. But we noted that this wasn't happening in the First Nations business sector. And this is something we felt that we could address. We could take our councils and our council buyers and start to work with them on an ability to introduce them to First Nations business and start create some new relationships. And as we did that, we learnt there were barriers. There were things that were particularly in their way. It could be a sense of awareness, it could be access. So we started to tackle what might those barriers be? How does LGP as a procurement aggregator doing $1 billion worth of spend under our contracts every year, how do we bring that expertise to our councils, but also how do we bring that to our First Nations businesses and get rid of some of those barriers? And start of what we did is looking at how we create that visibility for First Nations businesses. How do we find them? How do we know where to gain access? How do we know that we can use these organisations? Have they been tested? Are they ready for local government? LGP's done that work. And that's part of what we tried to create today. We're also using or removing a barrier by using the vendor panel system. And you'll hear that from Maria soon around how we want council buyers to engage with this particular scheme going forward. It's a system that's very familiar to all our 128 councils. So we've made that easy. It is simply finding, as again we'll demonstrate, it is simply finding this list and tapping in and sending requests for quotations through a platform that's already very familiar. And ideally with this vision, we want to impact the ability for New South Wales councils, 128 of them, to be working with First Nations businesses, finding out what unique value they have that can contribute back to council, that can contribute back to community. We also want to be able to help with those businesses to grow, lift employment, bring in new people, bring in new skills, drive new investment into community, and make sure that we're doing all the things that we can be across a number of facets. Because right now, with what I would suggest is a minimal or a minor level of engagement between our two sectors, if we can grow this, there are those sorts of things that can manifest, and I'll touch on them again a little bit later on. This was the image that really simply captures our vision. You can see there is a group of First Nations businesses on one side, pointing into the middle with 128 New South Wales councils pointing on the other side. We just want them to come together. We want this notion of a marketplace to form, where they're able to find each other, talk about what their needs might be, share what capability might look like, and engage and start to build those relationships, build those experiences together, and start to proliferate out in terms of how our two sectors can connect. Some of the issues we're trying to resolve, you'll know, certainly our council attendees today will know there is no policy. There is a New South Wales government policy for Aboriginal procurement. There is a federal government policy, but there is no local government policy. So we're not going to wait. We created this for that particular reason. We're not going to wait. We're going to create something that allows these two sectors to find each other. Address that issue of low level and or inconsistent First Nations business engagement by the local government sector. Lift the level of awareness, help councils find First Nations businesses really, really easily, and help grow that value and that collective value back into local governments and communities, and look at those community benefits that we can actually access and share together. I think one of the things we'll talk about a little bit later, we'll talk about management fee and so on. LGP itself is looking to invest all the management fee that we create from the scheme back into a local government or an Indigenous community program. This is not about money for us, it's about connection. And if we can do our own piece of work as LGP, investing back into Indigenous community programs or other community programs related to this scheme, we're happy to do that. And that'll be something that we do year on year as we go forward. Some of the benefits, as I've said already, accessing First Nations businesses, seeing our First Nations businesses grow commercially with that new engagement, with that new access, facilitating new partnerships, driving local or regional economic development, seeing how these businesses grow together, and new social procurement outcomes, part of which I've touched on already. In time, we hope to be able to have councils just naturally and actively engaging First Nations businesses. These barriers that I touched on have been removed. They're finding each other, they're building their own relationships, and progressively they'll just be leaning into what we've created all day, every day, and engaging in a proactive way. We've got new solutions being adapted for local government. I hope to see First Nations businesses think about, well, I've delivered this service before, but clearly local government needs something slightly different. So I'm going to do some work on that and present that to councils to see if that is something of interest. So we can start to see that work being done from the sector to say, well, let's meet you there in terms of what your need is. I'll adapt what I deliver as a First Nations business, and I'll come to my councils with something that they're particularly keen on. And I see that product development as an opportunity. That may manifest into other customers that a First Nations business might have, and that is a good thing, I think. We do want to measure the work that we do here. So as our First Nations businesses get involved with the scheme, they see some sales, they deliver on some projects, they'll be reporting to us on that activity. We'll be sharing that data, and I think that's important, but equally too, we'll be sharing it with everybody who wants to know. Councils will be able to see their level of engagement. First Nations businesses will be able to see their level of engagement through data and be able to measure that impact. And we'll be doing some more work in terms of how we proliferate some of that going forward. And maybe by Christmas time, some short-term goals for us is looking at our two sectors and supporting our two sectors. How do we get to $1 million worth of engagement between the two groups? How do we get maybe 150, 200 First Nations businesses on the scheme? The more the diversity, the more players in that scheme, the better. And we'll be working hard with First Nations businesses who are either certified Supply Nation or New South Wales Indigenous Chamber of Commerce assured to get as many of them on as we can. I've talked a little bit about the vision. I've touched on why we've done it. I've talked about what we hope to be outcomes in terms of why we started this initiative. Maria, who's been working with this project for us, as well as Haydar and Emily and others inside LGP, will now take us through a little bit about how this scheme works. Maria will talk a little bit about what it is for our First Nations businesses. We'll talk a little bit about what it means for councils. I'd now like to hand over to Maria. Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Luke. Hello, everyone. My name is Maria, and today I will be taking you through how does the scheme work, as well as the process for our First Nation enterprises and as well as the councils. The First Nation Procurement Scheme, which is managed by local government procurement, is designed to connect certified First Nation enterprises with New South Wales councils, creating easier access to local government procurement opportunities valued under the $250,000 threshold. This scheme simplifies engagement by bypassing the formal tender process, relying instead of a pre-qualification via an open expression of interest. Vendor panel is LGP's chosen sourcing and procurement platform used by all 128 New South Wales councils, as well as state agencies and not-for-profit organisations. Key scheme rules: eligibility and certification. To be able to participate, businesses must be certified by Supply Nation or assured by the New South Wales Indigenous Chamber of Commerce. Suppliers have an obligation to notify LGP within 7 business days once they are not meeting this requirement. This First Nations Procurement Scheme operates outside of LGP's prescription status. No tender process has been applied to the First Nation enterprises accepted into this scheme. This is not an LGP whole of contract panel contract. Therefore, this scheme has a maximum engagement or spend limit of $249,000, including GST. When councils intend to use the scheme, they should ensure they are only selecting suppliers from the scheme and not other panel contracts. A little bit about the process, and we will start with the suppliers. First Nation businesses can express their interest via the LGP website by simply clicking on the expression of interest link, which then proceeds to complete the web form with the required information and submit. When the EOI is received, kindly allow LGP 10 working days to review your application. LGP conducts a thorough vetting process of the submissions to ensure businesses meet the required standards. Once approved, you will receive a welcome kit, which has all the information you require and outlines steps of how to set up your organisation on Vendor Panel. On your Vendor Panel profile are also listed your insurance compliances, as well as a current certification with a copy of the certificate. A little bit about the councils. The list of accepted businesses to the pre-qualified scheme can be found in Vendor Panel under the local government procurement lists. LGP is encouraging New South Wales councils to start sending First Nation enterprises under the scheme new opportunities for business. Councils can use Vendor Panel to send an RFP or an RFQ. You may also extract the contact details and send First Nation enterprises RFQs directly. LGP is collecting data and 0.5% management fee, where 100% of all the scheme revenue will be reinvested back into various First Nation programs. No matter which method your council chooses to engage, to help us update our Power BI dashboards, please clearly state in your RFP or RFQ that your engagement is in accordance with this First Nation pre-qualification scheme. To help you get started, we will now move to some short demonstration videos, how council can utilise Vendor Panel, followed by how First Nation businesses can respond. Thank you.
As a supplier on the First Nations Procurement Scheme, some of you may be using Vendor Panel for the first time. In this short session, we will show you how to find and respond to requests from councils. On your Vendor Panel homepage, you should see a Current Request section, which will show you all the requests from councils, which match the categories you have already self-selected on your Vendor Panel profile. In this example, we will use a professional services request. If you hover over the different icons to the left, it will show you the different options for interacting with the request. Firstly, the magnifying glass icon will display the details of the request. Here you can see the opening and closing dates of the request, further details about the request, any attachments the council has provided, and the details of the requesting council itself. Secondly, under the question mark, you can contact the council directly for further clarifications regarding the request. Thirdly, you can access any documents attached by the council by clicking the file icon. You also have the option to decline the response by clicking the X, or flag the request if you'd like to respond later by clicking the flag icon. Lastly, and most importantly, you can create your response by clicking the pen and paper icon on the far right-hand side. By clicking into the response icon, the response wizard will walk you through the response process. Firstly, you can select the supplier list that you wish to respond against, which will be the First Nation Procurement Scheme, and the supplier you wish to respond as. In that case, that you have multiple companies under the same Vendor Panel profile. You may then proceed to the next step where you can enter further details about your response to the request. Example, your capabilities, relevant experience, or any other piece of information you deem necessary or relevant to the request. You do have the option of adding a file here if you'd like to upload anything relevant to the request, for example, a company one-pager or list of previous works. In the next section, you can decide if you would like to enter detailed pricing mode or summary pricing mode. A detailed pricing summary is generally preferred. Please note as a reminder that all projects going through this scheme must be under the tender threshold of $250,000. This means that for you, pricing must not exceed $250,000 in total. In the final section, you can update or confirm your account details and then finally save your response as a draft if you'd like to return to it later, or post to buyer if you're ready to submit. Once your quote is sent to the council, they will go through their evaluation process and select the supplier which they feel is best suited for the request. If you'd like to check the expected decision date, you can find this under the microscope option. You will be notified by the council if you are successful, and you may liaise with them directly on the project following this decision. Equally, you will also be notified if you are not successful. That concludes our quick tutorial on accessing and responding to requests. If you have any further questions, you can reach out to the LGP team at lgpcontracts@lgp.org.au. Alternatively, you can access many vendor panel training videos under the videos tab on your profile. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Appreciate the overview. I think it's useful for us to see how it works inside vendor panel. Again, council buyers who are familiar with that is good. And equally too, we can support any First Nations businesses who are looking to respond to those requests as we go forward. Just keeping conscious of time and making sure we do get to listen to some of the outcomes from what this scheme we think can create. I touched earlier, Debbie Morgan-Frales joined us. She is our First Nations consultant here working with LGP, primarily driving and guiding a lot of the work we're doing with our very first Reconciliation Action Plan. Before I hand over to Debbie, I might just do a little bit of an introduction so you know who Debbie is, and then Debbie, I'll invite you to share some of what you've got for us and for our audience as well. But firstly, Debbie's a Wiradjuri woman from central New South Wales, a direct descendant from the traditional lands of the Bori people who reside at the foot of Mount Genabula. She's got 40 years experience in Aboriginal affairs. Debbie's approach to work, she likes to share that she's worked in First Nations people, particularly working as a practitioner in diversity, equity, justice, belonging, First Nations education, organisational two-way governance, disability, social and emotional wellbeing for First Nations social equity. She continues that advocacy work through her capacity leading the Burmalong consulting practice. As I said, she is our consultant on the LGP RAP committee, which we're very grateful for. Debbie, thank you for your time today, and I'd love to give you a warm welcome and hand over to you to share a little bit about what the impact of this can be for these two sectors coming together. How can we help and grow and proliferate those First Nations businesses?
Thanks, Luke. So I wanted to firstly acknowledge that I'm coming from Bunurong country. I live off country and have for quite a significant amount of time. But throughout my career, working on projects that have included an element of social procurement, much of the time I worked from a position that procurement was mostly about buying things at the best price, whilst working on solutions for organisations to commit to strengthening their supplier diversity focus, as many people who don't necessarily tend to work within the sector do. We don't really understand how the machinations within an organisation necessarily work about procurement. It's a learning experience if it's not the life you live every day. So my passion for supplier diversity doesn't come from the traditional idea of diversity of goods and services themselves, but benefiting the purchaser by diversity from the perspective of social responsibility, including through place-based procuring from local small business in general, to specifically procuring from First Nations local small businesses and more broadly state and nationally based First Nations small and larger suppliers. The more I've learned and experienced, the more I've realised it's lots more than that. and not just about purchasing at the lowest price or using local community engagement or knowledge of local business. But one of the most important aspects of supplier diversity comes from a position of social procurement. LGP has realised that there is much work required across all sectors on gaining knowledge and understanding of the contemporary position of First Nations business across New South Wales, and it is not always just about continuing doing things as we have always. It's about building relationships with First Nations suppliers. It is also about managing risk internally to ensure systems and structures within the organisation aren't barriers to engaging First Nations suppliers. It is about ensuring operational continuity with identified and engaged First Nations suppliers and creating value from such supplier relationships. Equally, outwardly, it plays a role in strengthening First Nations community capacity through not only engaging with business itself, but creating employment in that business for First Nations employees, generating income locally with First Nation business that will be spent locally, therefore contributing to the local economy and future beneficiaries of that local economy, and in the process addressing underlying economic injustices and intergenerational poverty through economic growth and authentic employment opportunities. Some people in this webinar today will have little or no knowledge of the breadth of diversity of supply that exists in New South Wales within First Nations business. To rectify that, there needs to be targeted education and development within the procurement sector to be able to recognise and engage authentically with these suppliers to ensure a smooth and effective process for engagement. There is also an issue of bias, whether conscious or unconscious, and the uncomfortableness of it when it comes to the lens that First Nations people are seen through. This bias influences the individual every time they go about their business and ranges from the idea that in my community, none of us work and none of us own businesses, right through to everything we have as being given to us and we haven't had to work hard to achieve that. I would like to provide a case study, a really quick one, which is difficult around this business because it's such a big one, but I think it gives an idea of one of the best businesses in New South Wales, First Nations owned businesses. So I'd like to just really highlight Ash Group Holdings, which is general manager is Brad Draper from Orange. It's a proud Aboriginal owned and operated building and development company. What I love about the company's approach to construction is their forward-looking approach, the use of 3D printing in their construction, new techs, panelised systems, rapid build technology, the promotion of First Nations supply chains and local workforce development. And there's a whole lot of other stuff, but particularly social impact design that they incorporate cultural elements such as yarning circles, youth-safe bedrooms and elder spaces into housing projects. That's just a quick take on one element of their businesses. And they're always looking at the future. They have a future pipeline of growth. They also have a training arm which provides core training in all aspects of construction, high-risk work licensing, mining and civil construction, construction industry, government workforce upskilling. And then to their last enterprise is Bunjil Beverages, which is one of my favourites. Now, I'm not sure if you see it, Bunjil Beverages. It already is retailing through Harris Farm Markets, Orange Wineries, and Dry July in 2025 will see their products being served in all Qantas lounges across the country. So these are great achievements, and that's an example of something that does not necessarily sit within the mindset of when entities are considering engaging First Nations businesses. The one further element I'd just like to highlight is that as a part of it, there's a QR code on every bottle of Bunjil drink that if you scan it will tell you a truthful and honest historical story or current contemporary story about Aboriginal culture and Aboriginal history. So that's that one really quickly. And I hope it's shown that we need to think outside the square when it comes to engagement. And as you can see, I've delivered to you an example of one of the finest First Nations run businesses in the country, and you are all lucky enough to potentially engage with this future-looking, innovative, sustainable and socially conscious entity. Disclaimer, it's not a public relations exercise or advertising for this company. It's just that I've recognised over the years that this is one of the best companies out there. And I just wanted to, in the rest of my short time today, let people know that one of the biggest issues we have is that people consider only engaging our businesses during events like NAIDOC celebrations. Our businesses can be every day of the week engaged to provide goods and services to your organisation. And this is one of the major hurdles that this project will push back on. Finally, I'd like to thank Luke and his team at LGP for the opportunity to present today and build on the foundations across LGAs in First Nations procurement. The First Nations Procurement Scheme being launched today will be a great source of information and direction for all that choose to build community positively through social economy and business strategy rather than staying fixed in the "we have always done things this way" space. Thank you for your time.
Deb, nice work. And I think you've captured that in that case study with the QR code, telling stories through a product that links all the stuff we're talking about and why we should be engaging these organisations and that cultural, that community benefit that we can see from this. So Debbie, thank you. You've captured it beautifully. And again, we appreciate your support and your articulation of a really important aspect of what we've created here. Everybody, I've got a slide there that just shows you contact points. You've now got a flavour of what we have created, what is now available and what is now live. Please feel free to hit that QR code to find out more. We now encourage councils to work with their business development managers across New South Wales to explore how they could engage this particular scheme, have a look on vendor panel, look at some of the providers. Our work in the next 12 months will be to build as many of those First Nations businesses on that scheme as possible. If councils have First Nations businesses they love using that's not on that scheme, please send them to us. We're happy to work with them and we're happy to get them on that scheme where we can. We really welcome that from our councils. Equally too, for those First Nations businesses who want to know more, hit the code as I've said. There's an email address there. Please do send through an email if you need support. Maria, myself, Haydar, Emily and the others and the team are here to support you guys with how you get involved with our sector, which has got a lot to offer. Everybody, I just want to wrap up now and thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. We are over time. Debbie, I want to thank you for your time. Maria, thank you for sharing how this scheme works in your work to date. Jenny, for getting this webinar going. Trish and Bronwyn also too for their work in supporting our webinar today. Everybody, thank you. Take care. We look forward to working with you on LGP's First Nations Procurement Scheme.